Welcome to the channel, people. In this video, I've compiled 19 of my handmade wood DIYs for you to have quick access to a ton of wood decor inspiration. Let's jump into it. The measurements for these DIYs do not necessarily matter. You cut them to really what makes you fuzzy inside and house your tea lights, because we're doing two different tea light holders and we're going to make one key holding hanging rack. So really it's just, how long do you want your boards? How many tea lights are you housing? Then you cut it to what makes you fuzzy inside, people. It's that simple. There's no science behind it. DIY what makes you happy. You will need one of these bits to create your hole for your tea light in any wood that you're going to make. There are other tools you can use too. I have some of them. It's always a good time when I get out the drill. But for the most part, you will always want to make sure that you clamp whatever you're putting a hole in down onto something to make sure it doesn't go flying anywhere. I am using one of these little plastic ones so that way I get a deeper hole. You can use a real candle, nothing wrong with that. And of course, I can't even hold the 3 blocks up. I do try, people. I do try. We're going to start off. This is going to be a very modern design, and I really love how these turned out. And you do not need me to remind you that you create your tea lights however you want. This is how I did it. And the way that I went about this is I just lined them up, put a thin piece of washi tape over the top to make sure the line was straight down the top so it looked nice, neat, modern. And then I put it around the sides. I didn't go to the bottom. Erased off my pencil marks because I do forget to do that sometimes. Make sure you erase your pencil marks too, okay? Or don't if you don't want to. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, okay? Just calm down, calm down. I'm using antique Waverly wax for this, and yes, I'm using a paintbrush, and I'm doing it very, very light. Make sure that if you're going to recreate this, that you're not going heavy where the washi tape is. It will bleed underneath. Make sure that your little paintbrush, or if you want to use a napkin or a rag or whatever makes you fuzzy inside, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. You just be careful when you get close to the line so it doesn't bleed. Now, it's not going to be too big of a deal, and here's why. We're going to take some Dixie Belle drop cloth, and we're going to paint a beautiful tan line over the top to give it that modern feel. So all I'm doing is taking some more thick, well, this is thick, not some more. The other one was thin. You get what I'm saying, right? Anyhow, we're taking thick washi tape, and we're going to put over the top on the opposite way. So this way we are just leaving our little tiny line exposed with the raw wood still, and then we're going to paint over that. And I'm using a tiny brush and being very careful to not go completely around, and making sure that there's not too much paint on it so it doesn't bleed. If you want, you can take some Mod Podge and go over this and make sure that that will cover any extra bleeding. I did not want to do that. I was confident that I could handle not putting too much paint on there to create too much of a bleed, and this did just fine. I do recommend, though, try and take your painter's tape or washi tape or whatever you're using for this. If you're going to do a design like this, try and take it off before it dries. Sometimes if you wait till it dries, it will get stuck in there. And then I just sealed this up with some 2x Rust-Oleum, and that was it. These are the 2 apple barrel plaid colors I am using to enhance this piece of wood. I did beat this. I beat this board up. I sawed it up. I beat it with a hammer. Like, yeah, I rustic did it up. And to add some, we're going to put some highlights in this, and that's what the 2 colors are for. I am using some water and just wetting the brush and being careful to not saturate the wood, and try and stay inside of the natural wood lines. As you can see, I'm trying not to go over them. So this way, when we start adding in, I'm just using Waverly's antique wax. I really like this wax, because I feel like you can get so many different variations of color out of it, and it's very versatile in my opinion. I really like the product. Anyhow, once you get your layered wax on there really well, you can continue going over and just adding more highlights with the paint like this, and then make sure you do get in all them little grooves and seal it, and you're all done. For this next part, it would be a good idea to say you need all these things to make this happen. It is not extremely complicated, but it does take a little bit of patience. But if you want to create something unique to yourself and your home and however you want. Now, I'm reselling these items just in case you're wondering what's happening to them. That's what's happening to them. I like to build things and, you know, put my beauty out in the world. It's my beauty. If you don't think it's beauty, you just keep your opinions to yourself, okay? Listen, I'm here for inspiration. You be nice to me. Anyhow, where were we at? So, we are just taking our 3 pieces of board and we're going to make a little shelf on here. And I'm lining them all up to make little marks for our dowels because we want to drill little holes in them to make sure that we can have a good tight bond. So to start with our holes on the side, I am clamping the pieces of wood down and then drilling the holes where I marked them in the sides. You want to make sure these are deep enough that you can, on each side, I would say at least 1/4 inch to half an inch, depending on how much wood you have. But, you know, you do you. I'm not here to tell you how to do your DIYs. This makes me fuzzy inside. I'm pretty positive this is not going nowhere. I then take the dowels just to be safe, you know, and put it in the hole, make sure it's, you know, all good. And once I have all my little spots, you know, cut, I then just come in and start chipping away with my little wire cutters. You, depending on how thick the dowel is, now you can actually get little dowels already, or little, I forget what they're called. They might be called dowels. I can't remember at this particular moment. I'm having a brain fart. That you can purchase them at Home Depot or Home Depot. I should probably delete all that out, but I'm gonna keep rolling with this anyhow. But as always, you know, I can't do anything without problems. I done glued the pegs in the wrong side. If that happens to you, people, do not stress. Quickly notice it. Get yourself a pair of needle nose pliers, grab your dowels, and pluck them back out. Okay, be mindful of doing it with your finger. You'll get the wood glue, it gets sticky, it'll get messy. Okay, let's move on. Now that I got everything in the right holes, I am just going to carefully attach everything, pushing it together, making sure to clear up. You want to definitely clear up your wood glue when you do this stuff, because depending on if you're staining it or whatever, it's not going to stain well. It's not going to be pretty. So just make sure. I'm painting this, so I'm not worrying about it, you know. But this is what it looked like when I had everything all clamped together. This is, you know, it's a monstrosity, but this works. Like, it's holding my shelf together, it's keeping all the pieces together. You're gonna definitely want to let that dry for 24 hours, and I'm coming back with some 80 grit sandpaper to knock off all those sharp edges. I also plan on de-stressing this very harshly, so well, maybe medium-ish, I don't know, but right now in my mind I think it's harshly, so you let me know. You don't have to. If you like your sharp edges, leave it alone. I am then going to put a layer of this flat black Rust-Oleum spray paint on here. So those of you who like spray paint, I haven't forgot about you. When it was all dry, I then took the 80 grit sandpaper again and distressed it. I distressed everything, every little, well, not every little thing. I mean, let me know, do you think this is, I think this is heavy to me, you know, compared to what I usually distress. Let me know, do you think it's medium heavy? I'd like to hear your opinion on it. Now we're just going to finish this up. I am going to tie in with the whole Farmhouse Rustic motif and add some of this rope from Dollar Tree. This next part is a preference. I like to add E6000 or Gorilla Glue gel whenever I am stapling something like this on. It makes me feel fuzzy inside, especially since I am selling it. I want to make sure that whoever I'm selling the product to also feels fuzzy inside, that it is going to last them. If you're using a hanger, you don't really have to do that, but I wanted to add this rope hanger and love the final result. Purchase these off of Amazon. They are just, you know, little hooks. You could get whatever kind of iron hooks you want. I wanted this to be able to be used for coats or jackets or a dog leash or, you know, keys. Just give extra space for their people to hang things. Finished up by drawing these in by hand, and that was it. For this large wall sign, we're going to be using one of these, and we're going to cut that down to size, and we're going to get ourselves some trim. Now, Home Depot has a ton of trim. I'm going to be using these. I'm getting 8 foot for $5.14. Look at the size of this board. I mean, for all of that stuff, I only paid $13 and some change. I do own a jigsaw, so that is a no extra cost to me. That's what I'm going to use here. You can also use a table saw for this if you have one, but I don't, so I'm going to use the jigsaw. And make sure you have proper blades for the jigsaw, because depending on the blade, you can get a messy cut. I've had that happen to me before. Before y'all go just cutting everything everywhere, make sure you measure your areas. My mom wanted a 24-inch by 19-inch sign for that large one on the wall, which is by far the biggest sign I've ever made. You want to make sure you measure straight across and draw your line before you start with your jigsaw so you can follow that as you go. Clamp down your wood to a table. I have a little work thing you don't see here. And make sure your settings are all correct on your jigsaw. This is set to wood, and here's an example of fast or slow. I'm going to keep this on fast. Now I'm giving you guys an idea of just how slow I did this. This is how slow it is. I kept it normal. This is me speeding it up. But I went very slow for every single cut to make sure I stayed on this line. There's no reason to rush. No reason to rush. Just take your time, making sure it's even. Now I'm going to share with you my favorite part, my staining technique. I absolutely love apple barrel acrylic paint for this. You can use whichever one you want, and there are several different ways you can do this. You can use a clear mixing glaze that gives you more of a finished look. This is my preference. I've been messing with this stuff for a couple months. So this is just me showing you my favorite way and how I go about this. I use about 2 to 3 tablespoons of water, and I'm using about a teaspoon of paint for each time I change colors, or every time I kick it up a notch, I'll add a little bit more water if I'm adding the paint to the same thing for different colors. As you can see, this is really light, and I just cut up a couple cheap sponges, and keep a dry sponge so this way you can wipe some, because you don't want it to be real runny, and then your board will get very gross. I don't know how to say it. It gets gross. It gets blotchy. We don't want none of that. For this, because I am also doing them so many signs, I want the colors to match. And I know it's late. You're like, Brandi, why are we doing this so late? We're staining, people. We're not painting and completely covering it. We want to see the wood grain. We want to see the different variations. So we start out light and then we kick it up a notch as we go. We're going to add more paint colors. We're going to add different colors, and then we're going to change it as we're staining it. Now, if you listen to anything I have to say during this entire video, listen to this. Go the whole way across with the wood grain. Follow the wood grain as you're going. See how slow this is? It's getting darker. I'm just following the grain all the way. I'm not stopping midway through. You will have splotch marks. You can't fix that. You have splotch marks. Some people do that with their dry brushing. I do not like that. Even when I dry brush, I go all the way across so it's a smooth blended look. It is just a preference. If you like your splotches, I support you in your splotches. And if you're watching this right now and you're like, Brandi, don't nobody have time to worry about if I mix too much paint or water, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Go to the store and buy regular stains. They have grays and different tones. They got like the cherry maple. It comes out like red. You can do whatever you want to create your own stain. You can use those as well and customize and blend with this. I'm also going to show you in one of my Try It Tuesdays or stencil, and I had some subscribers say they wanted to see that, so I'm going to show you how I do a stencil with this as well. As I continue going through the boards, I start, once the colors really start coming in, I just then start spot staining. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a little bit more in this spot. I'm going to put a little bit more in this spot, and then would use my dry brush to kind of blend it, smear it as I went. So they just kind of really started, see how everything just kind of looks all smooth together. I really love the dry brush. It really helps. We're going to let these dry, but real quick, I do want to show you the giant board. Look at this. It is stunning. It's one of my favorite pieces I have made with my stain art. So now that everything's dry, we are going to want to cut our trim. And here's a miter box. This is an example of something you can use to cut your trims. You want to make sure they're on 45-degree angle. And just as me just giving you an idea, showing you exactly what this looks like. And you'll have, every time you cut your corner, you're going to have it match. I'm not even going to perpetrate on y'all. I quit on that miter box and moved on to my miter saw. I had to. There's too many cuts. It's too much. But if you got the stamina for it, you miter box it out. Going to cut two 10-inch boards with our 1x3 pieces of wood, and then two 7-inch boards with our 1x3 pieces of wood. This is the only part I'm going to show you where we are using our antique Waverly wax to stain this. Wanted to keep this really simple, budget friendly, and something most of my DIYers probably have in their house. We all love our antique Waverly wax, okay? So I thought, let's just use this on everything. Why not? Plus, I like rustic stuff, and I like how this looks. Once the project is dry, you're going to want to attach all your pieces. Now, how you accomplish that is completely up to you. I'm using a nail gun and wood glue for this. If you want to use a drill or screws, or you want to just use a hammer and some nails, have at it. Whatever makes you feel fuzzy inside. People, I will support it. We're keeping this nice and simple and literally just attaching them on the ends. We're not cutting no 45s. You could totally do that if you want to, but we are not. I want you, if you just have a miter box and basic tools, you're going to be able to make these items. Now, once your box is complete and your wood glue is dry or your nails are in there, we're going to start with the fun stuff. Look at these little branches I got from Dollar Tree. Who has seen these at Dollar Tree? Are you sleeping on Dollar Tree? They got these branches that are painted and they're all different colors and I love them. So I bought these a while ago to put these in here. We're going to dig out a little hole. Not a huge hole, a little hole. You could use a drill bit for this, you know, a knife, honestly, an X-Acto, something. I have these little tools, so I just started scribbling, you know, clawing at the wood and getting us a space. So I'm clipping them down to size and then I'm making sure they're kind of tight where I gotta kind of force them in the top. Once I put the wood glue in there at the bottom to have the thick part of the stem in there, so this way I knew once it dried it wasn't going anywhere. And look at this, it's so cool. Now not every piece, you see that little gap right there, not every piece touch the top, but make sure that they touch the top, at least some of them. And then I came back and hit the top part with a small amount of glue. See how tiny this amount of hot glue is? This is just so it holds in place while that hot glue has time to set. So I did this for each one of these, and when I was all done putting the branches in, I came back with the wood glue and then hit them where all the branches overlapped or touch one another to make sure none of these were going anywhere. Added some fairy lights for a little bit of ambiance, and that was it for this one. For our next project, we're going to get a 1x4, and these furring strips are in worse shape than the 1x3s, but I'm going to have to suck that up because they're only $3.48. And we're going to start this off the same way we did the 1x3 with the 80 grit, and then follow it up with a 220 grit for that soft finish. Cut 2 10-inch pieces, and then mark at 1.5 inch and cut us 8 pieces at 1.5 inches. So when you're done, you'll have 2 10-inch boards, and then you'll have 8 little bits. See, little bits, we're gonna need 8 of these. And they're gonna go on here like this. There's a good reason I didn't attach them and stain them right away, because I wanted the wood to be on wood when I was putting the wood glue on there. I just feel like the bond is way stronger than if I do it with the wax or after it's painted. So I decided to go about it, you know, layering the wood glue, hitting it with the nail gun, layering with the wood glue until I had this. Once I had this, I then went back in with the wood glue one more time and then put our nails in from the top. Again, you can use whatever you want to use, your screws, your nails, your hammer, whatever's easiest for you, that can be done with this very project as well. And of course I run out of nails when I just need one more, but you know. Struggle my life. Once it was dry, I came back in and finished it up with the antique Waverly wax. Let that dry, and then those of you who are not new to me know I mess with stain art, and you've seen me do this before. Most of the time I'll do it before I wax, but since I'm sanding this afterwards, I'm just taking some blue custom stain and gently painting in some very thick lines in the wood grain. Now it's a little bit messy, but it's not going to matter because we're going to go over this with a sandpaper, and it's really going to cut out all of the blur and just leave some of that color in those wood grains, and it's just absolutely beautiful. To tie in some of that color to the sides, because we have those blocks holding all the sides together, I'm just doing a little bit of stencil art, and the wood pieces are uneven, so I'm not using a sponge or anything like that. You'll have a tremendous amount of bleed. This is very intricate and a little painstaking, but it is worth doing it with a paintbrush. I had everything to complete this piece, so all I had to purchase was the wood. I did add hangers and little cup holders at the bottom. going to use a 1x8, and it is $3.22 for a linear foot. Now, we're only going to need 1 foot, and these boards are really nice, just like the common boards. They're pretty finished, okay? And I'm saving myself a little bit of elbow grease. This is a smaller piece because, as you can see, some are really long, so I'm just going to pick this up, and I'm going to ask for help from Home Depot. So for those of you who don't have tools, or you don't have, or want to waste your time cutting it down, they'll do it for you. To start this project out, because we're creating a nail piece of art, you're going to want to poke your holes in there, try and create some type of outline. If you want to stencil something on here, you know, do that. I freehanded this little jar type looking decor with this little plucker. Looked for my hammer, couldn't find my little small hammer. I don't know where it is. My house is a DIY catastrophe is what it is. And I decided to use the little needle nose pliers that are usually used to hold the tiny nails in place, and use the flat part to hammer in. Yep. It was just this for an hour and a half. This was my life. So I used a pair of tweezers, or, you know, whatever I used these little tweezer things for to hold my nails, and then used the flat part, and I just carried on. You do you. I was just not doing nail art. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I will tell you, I had a napkin picked out for this project. I bought the napkin a hot minute ago. I knew this was something I wanted to make. I had it in my mind. I was like, we're doing it today. And it turned out okay. I mean, look at it. It's not bad. However, once I got my napkin, I didn't bother to measure it, you know, before I made my nail art. And as I started putting the pieces together, it was too small of a piece of nail art. So then I had to start, you know, plucking the nails out the bottom that I worked so hard to get into place. So this way my napkin, which was the whole reason that I was making this in the first place, would fit on my jar. So the moral of the story is, if you do this DIY, make sure that your napkin will fit what you're doing, so you don't have to go back and rip out pieces. It turned out fine. However, learn from my mistakes, as I usually tell you. Learn from them, because oh my gosh, I was so mad at myself, this whole thing. Now, there, in my opinion, is no right or wrong way to wiggle your string around your nails to get the nail art effect. I literally just kind of wrap it around, squiggle it back and forth, and I'll do 2 or 3 layers just to ensure that it's on the nails and it's not going to just pop off. I do like to finish up the ends with a little bit of Gorilla Glue gel just to make sure that they're holding on there. And then I went in to give this a little bit of a 3D look, layering some antique Waverly wax and some white chalk paint, and then followed it up with just 3 solo wood flowers at the top and painted on the stems. You could use some dowels for some stems, you could use some metal for some stems, a little metal floral wire. I just decided I was going to paint them on there. And all in all, I really like how this one turned out. What do you think? On a run from my given disaster, speed away from the holy mind, pride. That's where I never thought it would matter if I'm gone back. For this project, you can use a 1x4, a 1x6, a 1x8. This is a 1x4, and I cut it to about 7 inches. I'm gonna take some white twine. Use whatever you have on hand. In the prices, it is exactly what I spent on like the wood or anything extra that I didn't have on hand. Most of these are all easy enough that you can just grab something you have laying around the house to create the look that I'm giving you. I'm taking some solo wood flowers. I dyed one blue, and then I'm using Gorilla Glue gel to attach them to where the twine is, so that way it hides all the frame. A little laser cutout at the bottom from Dollar Tree. You could use a stencil or leave it plain. It looks fine that way too. A picture. These are my babies. They are younger in this one. I got me 2 teenagers on my hands now, people. My son is going to kill me if he knows I put this in a video. And that's it for this one. For these tube sconces, you can cut whatever size wood you really want for the projects, and you can have 1 or use 3 like I'm doing here. I painted these each 3 different colors. You can do them all the same, there's nothing wrong with that. Let them dry and then sanded them down and give them a little bit of a rustic look, and hammered in a sawtooth hammer and hanger on the back. These tubes are from Hobby Lobby and they are $2.99 each, which I did use a coupon on one, so it kept my price barely under $5. But yeah, $2.99 each because we needed 3. You could do 1 and then just spend $2.99, but I am doing 3. So I had this metal piece laying around from Hobby Lobby and figured we were going to just use this. If you don't want to spend $6 on this sheet, then just go to Dollar Tree. They do have galvanized metal pieces. Cut you a string like this to wrap around your metal tube or your tube. And actually Dollar Tree has little glass tubes like this too, so you can even save on the tubes. I just happen to particularly want these exact tubes, so you can literally grab the products from Dollar Tree and save even more if you do that. I've used this little bit to drill in holes on the side and then had tiny little screws to screw in, and this way I know my tube is not going anywhere with this galvanized metal holding it in place. I really love how the 3 of these turned out, and I feel like the colors complement each other. This would look amazing even with stencils or raised stencil on them too.
It doesn't even matter how hard I try, 'cause when I hear your voice my walls come down. Boy, you are the only thing I want. There must be a way I can make you see that.
For our next project, we're going to cut up a 1x3. We're going to need to measure it to about 6 inches, and we'll need 3 boards cut to that size. I also wanted to create an open frame at the top and the bottom, so I'm using this square dowel I picked up from Hobby Lobby. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to, but I wanted the square open frame at the top and the bottom. Once you have your pieces all cut, you bring them inside, and then we're going to glue these suckers up. Now, mind the crusty bits on the top of my wood glue bottle. It's at the end of its, life expectancy. I need a new bottle. The wood glue helps for a long lasting bond, and I am going to leave a very small spot of bare wood right in the center so I can put a little smoosh of the hot glue in there for a quick and instant bond while I am trying to staple these pieces together. This is creating the backing for our silhouette art we are going to make. Now you could use painter sticks for this if you want as well, but I just wanted to do it with a thicker piece of wood. Honestly, any type of wood would be nice. Just make sure it's sanded really fine, and make sure before you go stapling these together that your hot glue has had a chance to dry, because if not, they're going to just kind of pop off, because it definitely takes 30 minutes to an hour for the wood glue to really dry, and even then I wouldn't trust it. And it should go without saying not to have more tools in your area when you're trying to staple or nail anything together, because accidents happen. To create the art, we're going to use these 3 colors. You can use whatever 3 colors makes you fuzzy inside or matches your decor or whatever you're going for. And I'm just using these toss away sponges from Dollar Tree. Nothing magnificamazing, just whatever. And we're just dabbing them all over the wood. There's no rhyme or reason, whatever you think looks nice, and just blotting it. Make sure that your little sponge is pretty dry so it's not like overly soaked as you're doing this. And you even want to try and make sure certain sections are dry so they don't get all blended in together and change colors. Now, if you want to leave this section just one color, go right ahead, but I didn't. So this is the point in your silhouette art. You would then turn to Cricut or whatever vinyl you have cut out. Yeah, my Cricut app wasn't working. Thanks, Cricut. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. So I grabbed some packing labels and I stuck them together. I free drew an elephant on here. This is the struggle, people. Me and this Cricut machine. So I then had to cut out this wonderful little elephant that took me like 20 minutes. And then If it wasn't bad enough, I cut off its nose. Oh, I just cut his trunk off. Oh, damn it. No worries. Me and my DIY skills just, you know, stuck that sucker right on top of the bottom one, and off I carried on with my silhouette art. Now, this is such a beautiful technique, people. You could use people or flowers or really any image that you want to create this. And like I said, if you want to do a solid color, you go right ahead. However, be mindful, this is a paper label and you don't want to get it wet, because in case you haven't seen this nightmare that I did, the paint will absorb into your paper sticker. So I was real mindful just to go around the edges. That's why it's always have an actual vinyl piece. But anyhow, I'm not going to be bitter about it. You're going to need you a crusty brush, or toothbrush. A toothbrush will work with this as well. Put a little bit of paint on it, and then we're just going to flick it. We're going to flick it all around our little piece. And this is just going to get some little specks. Now you can get wild with it if you want. I didn't get too wild with it, just a little. I just wanted a little extra around it. And then don't really wait for it to completely dry. Go ahead and peel this bad boy off. And at this point, if you really want to keep it just how it is, you go right ahead. But this is where I'm going to add the 2 neutral pieces I cut for the open-ended frame. And it's so cute. For this idea, you're going to need a 1x2. I forgot to plug it in. I cut this little piece down to about 5 or 6 inches and then painted it white. I'm then taking some laser cutouts from Dollar Tree, and we're just going to figure out which one kind of fits on here. I went with Inspire because it fit on here just perfectly. You will see in the reveal. And then I'm going to grab a couple of these little paper piece. I can never remember what these are. I should Google it, but I'm going to be lazy, so forgive me. And we're going to clip the back off of these to create some embellishments. You can use a trash bag or a little Ziploc baggie to cut them in, or how I just wrap my hand around the whole piece to protect it. Now, before I started attaching, I roughed it up a little bit so the glue will make sure that this sticks on here better. You don't have to do this. I like to do this. I just feel like once I get the glue on there, it just grabs it a little bit better and my pieces tend to stick well. I'm using my favorite Gorilla Glue gel. Yes, I finally have some. I run out of it so quick because I use it so much. I also have this link down in my Amazon store, and I try to link as many products as I use in my videos on a regular basis down there in case you're interested and want anything that I'm using. You can grab it for yourself. And that's going to be it for this one. For our next one, we are creating the cutest little houses using these 1x2s, and I'm just creating 45-degree cuts at the top like this. Look how cute they are. They're so adorable. I'm going to use Waverly's Plaster and Waverly's Moss color paints to do these. I'm doing 1 in each color. And then I'm gonna grab one of my favorite little stencils from Dollar Tree. It's like a rubbery piece. I just really like these. It's always worked well for me. And I cut the little stencil into pieces and then had to keep going smaller with the brush because it just wasn't, they weren't fitting in the stencil. So I ended up with this teeny tiny little thing to stipple the stencil into place. And look how cute it is. I thought these were very modern boho-ish and just really like the color contrast with both of them. Let me know what you think. For our next project, we're creating a floral holder, and I'm using, this is honestly a piece of scrap wood I had laying around, and I was like, I got an idea. That's kind of where I went with this. Grab yourself a giant drill bit. This is one of my biggest ones. Look at the size of this sucker. And then I'm going to put 3 holes in it. If you want to put more holes in it, you go right ahead. I'm putting 3 holes, 1 in the center, and make sure you hold on to it because if you let go, this is what happens. And you're going to want to make sure that you are clearing it out as you're drilling each hole. Now, if you're not sure how deep to go, mark your drill bit with some tape and then go and back and drill your holes. So that way they're all even. Unless you want even holes, then do you. But yeah, it makes a mess. All right, now it's time for the fun part. We are going to use Paint Blue by Dixie Belle in this beautiful napkin I was so blessed to receive by Allison. Thank you so much for sending this to me. In case you don't know, people, the way to my heart is napkins and Mod Podge. So I was so happy when I was like, I gotta make something beautiful with this. So to start off, I just took the napkin and kind of wrapped it around our wooden vase we're making and started ripping it deliberately in the spots that I wanted it to be ripped in. The cool thing about this project is you can use either side of the vase, so if you want to create them both entirely different, then go right ahead. Another thing I wanted to do for this video, because I always use Mod Podge, is use some polyacrylic. So that's what I did. I poured a little bit into the vase, and here's me waving the sponge. Like, here's my sponge, people. Don't forget we're using a sponge. So I'm using the polyacrylic and doing the same exact technique. I have had so many questions recently in emails and private messages, and bless all of you because I am here to help you on your DIY journey. I do go over every single one of my projects with the sealer. So whether I'm using Mod Podge or this particular project, we are using the polyacrylic, I will go over the napkin to seal it. It also does not matter if you use a sealer like this. It really depends on what your preference is when it comes to creating your decoupage piece. For my furniture, I really love using polyacrylic. I also just feel more fuzzy inside with that long-lasting hold. Not saying that Mod Podge will not do the same, but I really don't want to Mod Podge a dresser or a nightstand or end table, if you know what I mean. So polyacrylic for the furniture. Then I'm gonna take this stamp here, and this is in my Amazon store. I picked this up, and you can actually, I'm just taking some paint and kind of going over it in some areas, and then I'm gonna press it in there. If you want to use your stamp pieces, you go right ahead. I get lazy. So I'm like, we're just gonna throw some paint on here, and then we're gonna press it, and we're gonna be done and roll on. And then I sealed over the piece one more time, and that is gonna be it for this one. For our rustic weathered sconces, we are going to use this old piece of 1x4 that I had sitting around, and you can create these as long or as small as you want, so cut them how you want. Make sure you beat your boards up with a hammer, you put some holes in there, dents in it, just, you know, go to town on that joint. Or don't if you don't want to beat the board up. I beat the board up, okay? So that's just, you know, that's how we're rolling with this one. You can also put your little shelf either way, it doesn't matter, but I did want mine the opposite way, so like the ends were kind of on the sides and the smooth front was like that. I don't know how else to say it. It was like this. The best part is getting this little shelf to stick, because it's a tricky thing. You're going to need a nail gun. I don't know if you have staples long enough. If you do, more power to you. I'm using wood glue and hot glue, and then I'm pressing it on here. Now before you do this, make sure it's level because once that hot glue sets on there and you start nailing this sucker in, you are done. You can't do anything about it. So if your little shelf is a little crooked, then you're gonna have to just rebuild the whole thing. For our base color, I'm using this Dixie Belle Hurricane Gray. Now for the first two colors, I'm just not going to show you anything other than, you know, how I'm coloring it. And then I'm using the Tuscan Red. We're going for a very barn door weathered look, and usually I do not go into detail with painting. I skip most of it to save your viewing time, but I have had people ask me about my distressing technique and how we do this with the weathered, so I'm showing you how to layer the paint to help create that effect. You want to use at least 4 to 5 colors in my opinion for this. You're also going to want to make sure that one of your colors is going in between your little dents, so that way as you're layering they will pop out. Now I'm taking one of the lighter colors. I'm using this Pool color by Waverly, and I'm going over some of the bare wood spots that is not covered by any paint. I know some people feel like it's just dry brushing over and over, but it's really not. It is purposefully placing paint in different sections and being mindful to not go over too many of the same sections to completely void out one of the previous colors that you use. Getting those beautiful colors to really pop out in your finished project can actually take a little bit of work, and it's easy to just cover over them when you get to your final stages, and I'm gonna show you how to avoid that. Here I'm also going in over some of the paints with some of the bright colors and just kind of hitting it up for some pops of that blue. You're going to want to make sure this is completely dry every step of the way. Do not go back in before these paints have a chance to dry. Now get you a crusty paintbrush and we're going to dry brush some white on here, or you can use plaster or an off-white. Just dry brush it. The crusty bit paintbrush has like the hard chunks on it. So what I like about this technique is it gives you a bunch of gaps and it still allows all these colors to pop through. If you don't have a crusty bit paintbrush, I used to use a chippy brush. Just make sure it is super dry and barely any paint on there. Let all of this dry, and then you're going to come back in, I know, with your top color. And for that, I'm going to use Dixie Belle's Chocolate, which is a brown, and a chippy brush. And how you're going to avoid completely covering over all of these beautiful colors so they shine through with your main color is by getting a nice amount on your brush and then using a paper towel to take most of the color off, and lightly, not hard, lightly press your brush and do long strokes all down your project. Literally drag the brush down until all the paint is like there's no paint even coming off of the brush, and you carry on with this throughout the whole project. And if you start from one end to the next, it leaves a beautiful flawless finish where you don't have a bunch of gaps in your project. Before you add in your last layer, get some sandpaper. I had way too high of a grit. Get you some lower grit, like 150, 120 grit sandpaper, and just randomly sand it down to the bare wood. Make it random. You don't want it to be uniform. Natural old pieces of wood, they are not the same. Make sure you clean your piece up before you put on your last layer, which you're just going to take some black paint and do another crusty bit paintbrush and then drag the paint all the way down your project to add in those little peaks of black. This is the simplest of the entire video. You're gonna need 4 beads or pillars or little pegs, whichever you want to use. Cut your 1x2 to whatever size you want. Take some Gorilla Glue gel, some hot glue, and wow, you have a cute little stand. It's so cute. Look at it. It just houses all your cute little tiny pieces. Our next project is my largest in the video. We're creating a window. When I initially seen them stakes at Dollar Tree, this is where my mind went. Now, you might not be able to get the exact measurements because the longer pieces are a little bit larger than the ones at Dollar Tree, but they have a ton of scrap wood there. So just surf for your pieces. Now, I recently got this for Christmas. This is my first time using it. I see other creators using it, and things were flying everywhere. They were just, this was an experience cutting these popsicle sticks. My verdict wasn't out at this point on it yet, so I'm like, I did link it below my Amazon store because I was super excited to get it for Christmas and try it out. And initially I was like, meh, but we'll get to more of that later. Now for these pieces, I'm using some wood glue, and then I'm gonna take the little bits of popsicle sticks and attach them. If you're building something like this for yourself, you create the back however you want. I resell a lot of my pieces on my website, so I want to make sure they are as neat and tidy as possible. And I'm keeping this down to a minimum. I didn't want to use a staple gun here because I was worried it would go through the pieces because it's only 3/4 inch thick, and you know, kept it real nice. I let this dry overnight because I wanted to make sure it would be nice and sturdy for our next step, which didn't go at all the way I planned. So I had this little square piece that came in a multi-pack from Walmart, and I'm like, this is going to look awesome. It's going to make our window. And I'm just kind of measuring it around here and brought the gator shears back in to do its job. And this is where I fell in love with the gator shears, okay? They cut through this so magnificently, and it was simple. It was a clean cut, and I'm like, this might be a little bit rough on my carpal tunnel, but look at how beautiful it sliced it, and it was easy. Popsicle stick bad, Dow's good, winning. Now this gel says it cures in like 10 seconds. I like to think 30 seconds to a minute. However, it's still magnificent. It's got my full support. I love this glue. Doing a project like this is very questionable, and you need to be mindful with your placement because you're going to end up gluing your fingers together like I did. I tried being very precise in the placement of these two little joints right here. I sized them up, I cut them up, I then made sure to put them in the right little spot. And as usual, my math is off just a little bit. So I'm snipping little tiny pieces off, you know, just to kind of get it to fit in there because I don't want to push the piece I already got glued in there out, and I want to make sure that they all fit. So see this tiny little piece I'm cutting off right here? I decided in a world of worlds where glue doesn't stick to you that it was a good idea to attach that to the piece that was too short, which is on the right hand side. So here we go. Oh, I didn't show it all on camera because see how it started sticking to my finger? At that point, the damage was done. There was glue on my finger. And as I'm trying to attach this piece, it kept coming undone and sticking to my finger. So then I had my thumb, my pointer finger stuck to that little tiny piece. And for the rest of the day, my pointer finger felt like a potato chip. How to describe it? It was crusty. But yeah, so be mindful. See that little bit? Oh, what a nightmare. And here's me trying to show you my potato chip skin. Look at that. Oh Lord. Anyhow, let's move on. I wanted to give this a neutral color without keeping it exactly the color that it was, so I mixed a little bit of water and antique Waverly wax together. I experiment a lot with stain art, and to me this gives a very light coffee stain appearance, a faux coffee stain look. Here is the back of the project and the front of the project after it was dry. Let me know what you guys think of this one. For this project, I wanted to create like a 3-piece little item, something you can kind of shove on a shelf, on a windowsill. Really, you could do that with a lot of these. Did I mention I like small DIYs? So I cut little square-ish pieces, and I did 3 of them. They weren't perfect in measure. I wanted you to see, like, it doesn't matter if they're imperfect. You don't have to have a perfect cut. You paint them suckers, whatever color you want, let them dry. And you can add whatever you want to these. I decided to go through and make myself miserable finding a teeny tiny stencil that would fit just perfectly on here along with a laser cutout. It took me like 45 minutes to piece this little gem together. I know it doesn't look like much, and it's really not, but I absolutely love how this turned out. Let me know what you think of this one. The initial inspiration came from just needing a reminder system. I measured this to size to make sure it was just about what the measurement was for the original Dollar Tree item, and then took a tumbling block and glued that to the back of this. Once that was completely dry, I then took some antique Waverly wax and painted the entire piece and let that dry. And then I'm coming in with some metal that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. You could use some burlap fabric from this. I just had some leftover galvanized, shaped metal, and I love this kind of stuff. So I thought this would be really cute. I threw my Gorilla Glue gel on there, let this dry. Then I grabbed a little chalkboard that I had purchased from Walmart some time ago, put some glue on here, and let this dry. It's such a small piece that you could really fit it anywhere. You can fit it next to your kids' nightstand in the morning, just to let them know that they're special to you. Remind yourself of the date if you don't have anything quick, or your favorite little spiritual song. I wanted to use both pieces of wood in one decor piece, so I cut them down and then I stained just the back of them antique Waverly wax. I did leave the spot bare on the little square piece where I'm going to be applying wood glue so we can attach them shortly, but first we're going to do a coat of Waverly's plaster. You can use whatever color you want. We're going to decoupage on this, and I'm using a light colored napkin. So depending on how dark your napkin is that you decide to decoupage with, it will show through. So I'm using white. A little tip, put some Mod Podge on the tippy points of your finger and smoosh them together, and it will get all the sneaky little layers of your napkin off, so you can just use the top layer of the napkin. Because I wasn't ripping this apart, I was literally placing the napkin over the entire piece. I took Mod Podge, did the entire piece. It was very small, so I didn't feel I needed to do this in sections. Larger piece, I do moderate, tiny amounts of Mod Podge with a napkin and then apply the napkin. For this, I just did the whole entire thing and then took my sponge and pressed it completely down, and as you can see here, it's already stuck on there. It's not coming off. I then cut the next section down, leaving some of the branch with the flowers out, because we're going to give this a little bit of a 3D effect and put some wood flowers down here at the very end. And again, less is more with your Mod Podge when you're using a napkin. It's very easy to rip, so the more Mod Podge you use, the more it will slide, the more it will tear. And then I just take a 400 grit sandpaper and go around the edges, and it just peels right off. Once I was happy with that, I glued down using hot glue and wood glue our little square on top of our corner here, and then attached our little wood flowers in 2 different spots. If your flower's big, just peel it down. It's not a big deal. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, people. I hope you got some learning and entertainment out of these 19 handmade wood DIY pieces. Until next time, bye.